Viewers, listeners, welcome to another edition of Blighty Talks Bricks. My guest today is someone I've known since he was a little boy, actually. He's now a fully grown man. He's turned into a lovely man. I've watched from afar to see him blossom in his career. I've seen the twists and turns that have gone on that journey, but I'm not going to say any more because you don't want to listen to me talk about him because he's much better talking about him than me. So I'm going to move straight on to welcome my guest today, Mr. Shaun Weston, Managing Director of British Offsite. Shaun, welcome to Blighty Talks Bricks. How are you?
I'm very, very well, thanks. Yeah, very well. I know you want to hear me talk, but obviously, this is several episodes in now. It seems like the podcast's going well, isn't it?
Well, it's. I think I've said a good few times, and I've mentioned it to you. I don't particularly enjoy it. Don't like the way I look. Don't like the way I sound. But fortunately, and today it continues. I have lovely people on, so I do want to talk about you because of everything I said just at the start there. I've really enjoyed watching your career come along. You know that I've done a lot of work with your dad. We've done lots of projects together over probably 30 odd years now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it has been great watching your career, the twists and turns. And so my first question to you, Shaun, is did you know and did you choose? I know the answer, but our viewers and guests don't. Did you always know that you were going to follow into the property and the construction world?
I think the answer to that is a resounding no. It certainly never started off like that. And, my career, as you say, took a few twists and turns. And, at one point, my younger teenage years, dead set on joining the army, joining the military of some description, and spent quite a lot of time on that. And, and then that moved into automotive. And actually, I think I made a fairly successful start in a career in the automotive industry. Spent some time certainly in higher education, spent a lot of time around engineering, and actually went to do motorsport engineering at the University of Hertfordshire, and I was really enjoying that actually. And then I got into about year 3 and we started doing fluid mechanics and thermodynamics. And
you've completely lost me.
Yeah, lost me too for what it's worth. Yeah. But yeah, kind of got to a point where it was like, no, do you know what, actually, I've realised it wasn't for me. And to be honest, I think at the time, if I'm being honest with myself as well, took a little bit of a lazy segue into construction and felt like, maybe I need a time to reset and, go and see what's happening at Western Homes. And in actual fact, I think, like I say, although it might not have been the intention, kind of really found my feet there, and actually joined as a part of the construction management training program. So I'm site manager by trade. And then over time, first class honours degree in construction management, and then that grew into a career in Westerns, and spent a lot of time there, both on site and then into running our Western Logistics division, which is plant hire, and that's where we did our first bits of manufacturing. And then, funnily enough, it kind of joined back together between engineering and construction in British Offsite, and that's really where I made my home.
In terms of when you go, if I take you back, because I remember going with you on a lovely trip, a lovely dinner we went to at Sandhurst. What got you? What was your interest in military? Was it just as a little boy like the guns, or what was that?
I don't know. Actually, I think I've always had a kind of sense of duty. To be fair, it's kind of an appreciation. That we live in a great country. I'm a firm believer in that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have British Offsite over the door. But yeah, I had family that served in the army. My second cousin was regimental sergeant major for the Royal Anglian at the time. And they had seen action in Kosovo and other places like that, and sort of grown up around it, and always have done, and even now feel a strong affinity to the services. So,
and I know that I've been involved in some charity things with you in the past where you've looked after the British services.
Yeah.
But was there a time you just woke up and thought, actually, do you know what? The military, the army, the navy, the air force is not for me?
Do you know what, actually, again, that was going through higher education. I left school and went to go and I actually applied to Welbeck. And I think Welbeck's closed now, but it was the Ministry of Defence kind of higher education centre where they did things that would lead you into places like Sandhurst. But it's very, very selective. It's kind of the 1% and 1% and 1%. And I got right down to the second from last sort of final round of sorting, and managed to get from, I think, about 12,000 applicants down to sort of the last 300, and didn't make the cut there. Right. You know, and as a 16-year-old stroppy teenager, that wasn't great. So we thought we'd do the next best thing. So I went to a combined cadet force, sixth form in Cambridge called the Lees. And having spent, you know, my entire youth to that point, kind of relatively speaking, you know, normal teenage upbringing, you know, had my fair share of sort of interesting moments, and then to go into a highly regimented sixth form,
it was a shock.
It just didn't sit well with me. So I was only there probably for 4 months, and I think my parents got a polite call that, you know, he either needs to find something else or he's going to get exited. So yeah, no, they were delighted with that naturally. But then, to be fair, you know, one door closes, another one opens. That's what led me to the automotive industry.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I think sometimes, you know, especially when we come to end of school education, university education, sometimes we feel if we haven't achieved, it's a failure, and that's not always the case. It can actually be, as you say, one door closes and another one opens. Almost always.
I mean, I know, and especially for, you know, young people leaving school today, you know, and it's funny because you mentioned in previous episodes, you know, the construction industry has a great way of pulling people in.
Absolutely.
That might have come from it, you know, unconventional routes into the industry. You know, I'll still stand by that. But, you know, every time something doesn't work out, every time there's a failure, there's always a lesson in it. And there's always another door to open, almost always. There's very few situations where you're just done and dusted, is there?
No, and I think I worry in this day and age whether people think because of social media, this is social media, whether sometimes that bludgeons people. They just think, oh, I've buggered it up. It's not the case at all.
No.
As long as you actually try to learn from your mistakes, then you've got somewhere to go. You obviously took to education in a format though, didn't you? Because you wouldn't have come away with the qualifications.
Yeah. I think, yeah, you know, you got to have a certain kind of intelligence behind it, you know, to get any sort of higher education done. But having said that, you know, there's so many great options now in higher education. You know, you can do construction management, you can do, you know, some of the, you know, conventional academia, you know, you can do vocational stuff, you know, you don't have to, there's a lot of pressure now, kind of pick your career, got to stick to it. Like you say, social media, you know, has a habit of making you feel like, you know, if it doesn't work out, the world's going to end, and it just doesn't.
No, the world keeps going on, doesn't it?
Definitely. So you've got to be resilient, mind, but, you know, you can always find a way forwards.
Well, I think you've certainly got that resilient gene, that's for sure. Exciting times at British Offsite. I've been fortunate enough to be to the new factory. Exciting times?
It is exciting times, challenging times. Yeah. I think if we had gone back, you know, we have to make these decisions over long periods of time.
We do.
And probably if we went back 4 years ago when we made the decision to invest £45 million in Horizon with a crystal ball of exactly what today would look like, might have timed it differently. Having said that, you know, you have to make decisions over the long term and be ready to weather whatever storm that might look like. So, you know, it's probably not the ideal market to be really scaling up an off-site construction business. Having said that, you know, we're having some really great conversations. We're talking to the right people. The product has reached maturity, I think. The brand is maturing. You know, the sales proposition is maturing all the time. You know, but it's always difficult to drive any innovation in the construction industry.
Just touch on the product type, just because we'll have viewers and listeners who'll be going up. Well, I don't know what British Offsite is.
Yeah.
Just tell us what product you've got going on over at Braintree.
Yeah, sure. So at Braintree we build a product called Unisystem, which is, you know, the whole ethos behind British Offsite is that we're a developer-led offsite manufacturer. So I think in MMC or in modern methods of construction, there's a lot of manufacturers saying to the industry, "We think you want this." Whereas actually we've got the benefit of a developer saying, I want it to do this, I want it to do that, I don't want it to do that, I don't want it to do that. So it's a product-led kind of philosophy. But it's always about taking traditional construction and not reinventing it. We're going to package it up and deliver it a different way. So Unisystem is a building envelope product. So it's a 2D panel that we build into concrete frames as the frame progresses. So it's all stuff you would find at a conventional construction site. You know, it's a steel framing system, it's dry lining, it's windows, it's this, it's that. But we're just bundling it up into a kind of more holistic product so you can create dry envelopes faster as you progress a concrete frame, or now we have a load-bearing solution as well, where you don't need the frame up to 18 metres in height, so 5-6 stories.
And you mentioned the word challenges. Have the challenges come from the COVID world that we sit left in today? Because I'm, as you know, trying to sell, that's what I do for a living, trying to sell new property. I find now that the people's views of apartments are very different to what they were, I should say, before COVID was in our world.
I mean, I think what people want from their living space, like say, since COVID has changed, you know, I think there's also an element of, I think just society's moving on, society's changing. You know, I'm sure you guys see it, you know, buyers are so aware now of sustainability. You know, what impact am I having when I buy a property? How am I going to use this property? What's it going to cost to myself and to the planet to run it over the longer time? You know, it's not just about, you know, 600 or 700 square foot and does the layout work anymore. It's more complicated than that, I think. You know, I think the buyers are more and more aware. So, you know, we have to have a way of building which ultimately feeds into that. You know, and particularly, I think, you know, with the changing regulatory environment, you know, I think that's going to become more and more relevant. You know, we've got things like the Future Home Standard. You know, keep umming and ahhing about that coming in 2025, but that's going to put an emphasis on builders to measure their carbon footprint and achieve certain targets. We already kind of have that at the minute, but it's just moving higher and higher and higher up the agenda all the time.
And in terms of your challenges, I mean, when I come to, I'm like a spaceship, your place. I mean, I'm not technical in any way, shape or form. It scared the living daylights out of me, but it is very automated. Does that continue to evolve all the time? Do you get a phone call from the manufacturer that created this machine for you that you specially wanted and designed, and they say, "Oh, now we've got another one, Mr. Weston, and we need it can do this." Does it keep evolving as quick as that?
Yeah, I suppose it does and it doesn't. You know, I mean, things like the hardware. Generally speaking, you buy the hardware, you buy the machinery, and you want to buy it once. You know, I mentioned earlier, a £45 million investment. That is over a long lifetime. We've probably got 15 million in hard capital spend in Horizon, so you don't want to make that spend again and again and again. But then once you've paid for it, it's a bit like your PC. You know, you want to upgrade your software all the time.
Yeah. Upgrade
your software, maybe upgrade your firmware. You don't want to upgrade the hardware all the time. So it's a similar sort of approach, you know. And when we were choosing which vendors effectively to sell us this machinery, having something which you can evolve slowly over time, definitely part of the thought process for sure.
So challenging times in the property industry, full stop. Construction and house building, but you've got the energy, you've got the desire. I see that comes through every day. If I was to actually say to you, on Blighty Talks Bricks, I have this magic wand that I've created, and I give it to people like you that are in the industry, leaders, people that are at the front of the industry. If I said to you, Shaun, I'm going to give you this wand, you've got 3 wishes, that you make this wish and they're in play tomorrow. What things do you think that you would want to bring into play to try and make things better? Yeah.
I mean, without turning this into like an hour's rant, which is always a difficult thing, isn't it?
Not an hour, but have the rant by all means. Yeah. Saves me doing it this time.
I suppose, yeah. No, I think, you know, I think for me, in British Offsite, I suppose, look at it through that lens, we want to make it easier to innovate in the construction industry. That's one of the first things I'll be trying to fix. That in itself is a really complicated task, and there's kind of some fundamental ways that house building works which feeds that. So for instance, as always, planning system. So, you know, stability and security of supply, which then creates demand for property, which then creates demand for innovative systems like mine. If you don't feed the machine at the front end, you know, it doesn't matter how many government papers there are on MMC delivery and how many conversations we have about it. If there's not a need, you know, in new build property, you won't feed that bit over there. Yep. So, you know, at the risk, like I say, of repeating. So planning system's one. I think it is difficult to innovate in the construction industry because there's so many moving parts, so many stakeholders. You know, you think about in the automotive industry, they will take a different view on a long-term investment, because they know that, you know, Volkswagen's going to build ID3s and ID4s and a new model and a new model and a new model, and they can map that out over really long periods of time. Yep. To spend money now, which might not pay off for 5 or 10 years' time. You think about trying to do that in the property industry, where we're constantly cycling new projects, it becomes really hard to make those long-term investments. You know, and that fundamentally leads into, you know, where we want to sell, you know, British Offsite again, you know, we want to sell Unisystem, is that we need people to be willing to take a little bit of a chance on something new and innovative to ultimately make their lives better. But I think, you know, kind of throw in stability and where the market is at the moment and this, and it's really, understandably, I must add, really hard for people to go, yeah, there's a way that might make my life better, let's give it a try. It's hard to get people to that point.
Strange, isn't it?
Well, it's probably like selling property for you. You know, if people don't know what mortgage rate they're going to pay, it makes it really hard to sell, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know. Similar challenges, so I think that was 3.
In terms of, I look at you and I always see you, and I know it's challenging out there, but I always see you upbeat. I always see you great enthusiasm. Is that one of the genes that's been passed down? Is that just a natural Shaun's? That's what Shaun Weston's view of life is. He's, you know, it's been a shit day. I'm going to roll my sleeves up, and I'm going to work a little bit harder tomorrow. Or is behind this facade, is there any sort of times when you think, do you know what?
Probably a bit of both, frankly. You know, I think I genuinely am. You know, I'm 34. You know, I'm relatively speaking at the start of my career. You know, I have two young children, and I am a genuine believer that I can personally make a real impact in making their world better for 30 years' time. And the only way I'm going to go about making that great future happen is by bringing it to life myself right now. You know, nobody's going to bring success to me. You got to go and get it. You got to be resilient. Got to be willing to take a few punches along the way, get things wrong.
Well, we'll come on to that in a
minute. But yeah, you know, I think. No, it is genuine desire, and you know, frankly as well, you know, my father is a great mentor to me. You know, I've seen the way that he, you know, kind of responds to challenges. You know, there's very few times when he can't figure out some route forwards. You know, it might not be pretty. Sometimes you might have to face into, you know, that something's gone wrong. But there's always a way. There's always a way forwards. You know, you've got to just be resilient. I don't know how you create resilience in the world, but you know, I think probably at the moment, you know, there needs to be a bit more of it.
No, do you know what? I had this conversation over the weekend with some friends, one of which has been on the podcast recently, but the edition hasn't come out yet. And we were talking about, you know, my emotional wellness. I suffer a bit, probably a little bit more than I realised. But equally, by owning that, I'm also of, you know, the same process that it shouldn't be used as an excuse. You know, just because I don't feel great today doesn't mean that I shouldn't be, you know, well, I don't have to do anything. I can sit home or go and do, you know, go and sit down the river, wherever. That's not acceptable. Yeah. And so I do think it's important that there's an understanding that people struggle, but it shouldn't be an excuse, and it should be down to the individual to realise that they've got these challenges and to try and help themselves. And that's where I am with it. And I do see some people, they just seem to glide through with no challenges at all. And other people, I see them that they really struggle. It's extremes. But I think we do need to actually have some resilience as well.
Yeah. I mean, do you know, it's an interesting point you make, you know, by having awareness of yourself. In actual fact, you can improve your ability to dust yourself off and get back out there. Know that sometimes it's not all right, but you're going to keep going. Yeah.
I mean, there's been many a time over my life where, you know, I haven't fancied doing something. The thought of actually going to do what I'm committed to do that day isn't what I want to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's an element that, well, we've got to. Yeah. You know, we've got to keep going. We've got to keep moving forward, however difficult. But it's knowing you've got that challenge, and then actually saying, you know what, it's okay for me not to feel great today, and I'll still go about my duties.
Yeah, definitely.
But but we're all different.
I think as well. I mean, I can only speak, for personal experience. You're wearing the boxing gloves, which I really appreciate.
I'm going to talk about the boxing in a minute.
Sure. But I mean, I think, I think I choose a sport which gives me kind of a bit of context and perspective. I like.
I've noticed that shiner on.
I've got a decent.
We haven't got any money for makeup, so otherwise we could have brushed you up a bit. But
my wife keeps rolling her eyes when I walk in with them. That's for sure. But
we will come on to the boxing. One of the things, and I have it a little way, in a much smaller way. Your surname is probably the best thing and the worst thing.
Double-edged sword, for sure.
Double-edged sword.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you find dealing? I mean, the old man is well known in the industry.
He is, yeah.
I think he's a mentor to a lot of people.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, I've been in business with him for over 30 years. I know so many people that just absolutely love working for him, with him. But you following in, I mean, it probably would have been better if you'd been a captain in the British Army in some ways, or you'd been a racing driver.
Yeah, sure.
How do you find that situation? Do you find it sometimes that it doesn't matter what you do, people are never going to accept it's good enough, or do you not see it that way?
I don't know. I mean, I have a really close colleague that I work with, and he also spent a long time working for his father. And I think he really struggled with it. And if I'm honest, it is a double-edged sword. It's something that, I think ultimately I'm very, very grateful for, that I've been able to work with my father. I've been able to work in the same space as him. I think, it's a double-edged sword because everyone has high expectations. I think, personally, I've not tried to step into his shoes. Yeah. Kind of got some shoes next to his.
Yeah.
I think Eddie Hearn said that, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but he turned it to gold. Now, I would never profess.
Yeah, Eddie would say that.
Eddie would say that.
You and I have been in his company when him and Barry have had that conversation.
And I'll put a Shaun Weston spin on that. I think having a Weston name creates, it probably means that I have more doors, more opportunities in front of me, but I still have to open the doors and walk through them. Nobody's going to do that for me. My father's not going to do that for me, and the people around me aren't going to do that for me. That's still my responsibility to do that. And I think with that in mind, that's also why Bob's been very, very good to kind of not try and shoehorn me into his shoes, and I've not tried to step into his shoes. We've created something new over here, and I think, I think I'm always going to have a future in Weston Homes. It might not necessarily look like how Bob kind of acts in Weston Homes today. It might look slightly different. And I'm really excited that actually the second generation Weston can be doing the innovative off-site construction. I think there's a kind of a nice poetry to that, to be honest.
And it's, I'm lucky. I know you both really well, and I see the dynamics. You are really good at working together, and the thing I just underline that you said there, I think that you get doors put in front of you, but you have to open them and you have to walk through them, and you're certainly doing that, and that's lovely to see.
Appreciate it.
I want to come on to the things before we go down the boxing route. What happened to the motor driver? You're still doing that? I know you love thrashing around in cars with big engines and turning them upside down and all sorts. You're still doing that?
Do you know, actually, the last couple of years, because motorsport is an incredibly expensive pastime. So the last few years, actually, where the industry's not been doing so great since COVID, we've kind of just curtailed that, and rightly so, right and proper. But to be honest, that's created a bit more time for me to focus on work and to focus on the family. So I'm not off in Wales, here, there, and everywhere. I get to spend quite a lot of time with my kids, so that's
it's
nice
taken a back seat for the time being, and daddy role is coming into play.
Yeah. I think it might come back. But
I really don't have this need for speed. I don't get it. It scares the living daylights out of me. And I've never really asked the question of anyone that, and I've seen your fresh cars around. What is it? Things happen very quickly.
Yeah.
And I always feel that I'm losing control, even if I'm going at 40 mile an hour, let alone if I was going around a bend at some of the speeds I've seen you go around stuff in. Where does that come from?
I think it's probably it's probably kind of a bit of a desire to be in the moment. You know, kind of when you're absolutely thrashing around a country road and, you know, you're moments away from victory or absolute abject failure and smashing your car and potentially hurting yourself, you know, kind of, you cannot help.
That's the bit. You see, I'm not worried about the car. I'm not necessarily worried about the money. I have to knock a few dents out. I'm worried about my little big fragile body actually, but getting battered.
I mean, they're all kind of calculated risks, you know. I mean, especially with modern safety standards, you know, motorsport's fairly safe. But I think it's that kind of, to be honest, the element of danger that keeps you in right there in that moment. You couldn't be anywhere else if you tried.
And what cars were? Where did your sort of, where we've got a little stop, a little pause at the moment? What cars were you driving in the end?
I mean, I've still got my Mark II Escort, my rally car, you know, and I've probably got more happy hours spent in that car than anything else. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to drive Formula One cars and Le Mans prototype stuff, and nothing makes me happy like being in that Mark II Escort in a Welsh forest somewhere, spraying gravel about, getting really dirty and sweaty, and, you know, motorsport should be a little bit dirty if you ask me. You know.
And you like tinkering with the engines and stuff like that as well, don't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the Escort I drive now is Mark II number 2. First one's up in the big scrapyard in the Sky because I smashed it up pretty spectacularly in Jersey. And I probably
you walked away with nothing other than some scratches?
I walked away with a bit of a concussion, but actually my navigator broke his foot in 5 places. We had to traipse back through the Jersey fields to try and get to the ambulance.
You're still friends?
Yeah, it was my brother-in-law. He couldn't escape if he tried. So, but I had about 400 hours of my own time in that car, and I realised that when we built the second one, if we were going to compete properly and be competitors, you can't be emotionally attached in quite the same way. So I got a great company that I've worked with to build and maintain the second car. And
smashing things up, right? So just before, if I say anything, I've got my gum shield and it's got your name on it. So as you try to hit me, you see, I'm thinking, well,
there were microphones everywhere, and you know.
And I've got my gloves. I've got my little baby gloves. I've got my gloves.
Nice, very nice.
And I've seen you box. I've seen you in action. You've really taken to it, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, fighting again at the end of April, so that'll be my 4th fight. I'm hoping for a better result this time.
What was last time?
3 fights, 3 draws.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I've seen 2 draws.
Yeah, I'd rather lose, frankly, than draw again.
So, why? I mean, I used to box years ago. I mean, where we are in this studio, 2 of my boxing clubs are literally down the road.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
But I liked the training side of it when I was a youngster.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I necessarily. I mean, the 3 bouts I didn't win any of them. But what's your favourite aspect of the boxing situation, or is it just the all-round building up for a date?
I think it's a bit like with the motorsport. Actually, I think it's kind of like being in the moment. You know, kind of not necessarily life or limb. That sounds a bit dramatic, but you know, kind of putting your kind of personal and physical well-being on the line to try and achieve something. You know, be in the moment all the time. And I think even at work, whether it's work or boxing or motorsport, with my family, always trying to be in the moment and capture that magic when, you know, nothing else matters, effectively, whatever you're doing.
And how much training are you doing? Because you've got a fight coming up in a few weeks' time. How much training are you doing?
So, I mean, probably I'm in the boxing club and I'm sparring 3 or 4 days a week. And then I'll do a run and I'll do some weights in that as well. So maybe 6 times a week.
Is it really? 6 times a week?
Yeah. But the problem is I still like eating, so I can't quite make weight yet. But, you know,
you
keep up with the training.
Calories, mate. You can burn the calories. You can do both.
Yeah.
And so, do you get to know who you're fighting beforehand or not?
No, not until the night.
Not until the night.
Not until I walk out and see him in the middle.
But you're
of the
in
ring,
a division. For people that don't follow boxing, you're in a weight division.
Yeah. I mean,
you're not gonna get there and you've got sort of, you know, Joshua, you know, opposite. What level is it you're going to be?
So I mean, I do boxing. It's like exhibition boxing. So it's more than white collar. So you don't have the headgear and you don't have the big poofy gloves, but it's not licensed either. So it's not for money.
The events are sold out and they're lively, aren't they?
Oh yeah. Especially you know, because I'm from Harlow out in Essex. So you know, interesting mix of people. You know, from all walks of life, you know, not to put too fine a point on it. So yeah, they are quite lively events, but then that's kind of in the heat of it, you know.
And it was back, you know, back in the day for me as schoolboy stuff, very different to what you're doing, very different level, but it was a real mix of society that was there.
It is, boxing's poor man's sport at the end of the day. From all walks of life, and some of the best boxers come from the most tragic backgrounds, frankly.
Yeah.
And obviously, I probably don't fit that mould in that sense, but I enjoy the camaraderie. I like sparring with all the guys in the club. I like the physicality of it. I like being in the moment. And you kind of get that golden time and golden space in your mind, like I say, when nothing else matters.
Well, obviously, I wish you well when that comes about. I can't come to this one. I always say to you should stop. But
well, to be glad, I think I'm probably better off. You showed up in that blooming the club tie.
No, I'd actually come from Cheshunt Rugby Club.
That was it, yeah.
And yes, and I was in my people that follow the world of rugby. When I walked in that night, and I'd had a few beers at the rugby club with one, it was great. There was a lot of people in that function room, and the stairs and
there's a few turned heads, weren't there?
Well, if you go to the rugby club, everyone wears these blazers, and so a vice president, I'm a stagger, and I was just late. I'd left the rugby club late, and I wouldn't have made yours. So I thought, oh well, I'll carry on, and by then I'd had a couple of beers anyway.
Yeah.
No, I could see you when you got in the ring, and I could see you looking at me thinking, what is he wearing?
Well, no matter what the traveller family's in the ring in the event for, I was glad you were there in that suit and tie. So
they was looking at me thinking, wow.
I'm not sure what to make of this.
No, he's got to have a lot of confidence. Whereas if they'd come to Cheshunt Rugby Club, there would have been about 300 of us walking around. So the next time I come, I'll wear my blazer.
Top man.
So moving forward, mid-30s, what's the ambition now?
What's the ambition? I want British Offsite to become the absolute preeminent offsite construction business, both in Britain and in other parts of the world as well. It's really what I want to get us to. I think the construction industry, at some point the planning system has to make some progress. The market has to turn around, and that's going to create that demand I make reference to. And I genuinely think we can make construction better. We can make it more predictable, repeatable, more sustainable. I think we can do it all for the right price as well. Importantly, quite often people think, modern methods of construction and that equals cost. It doesn't have to, because, we've got to keep things simple, but we can make the world a better place. I'm really personally invested in that.
Well, I'm sitting here and I already know you, and I'm sitting there thinking, do you know what? He's right. Yeah, we can do this. This can happen. So it's interesting the way you leave people. That's certainly a gene you've got from your old man, for sure. One of the other things that I know that you're big into is your charities. I know that Westons are an amazing giver to charities. It's unbelievable what that business and your dad have done over the years.
Absolutely.
Is there any particular charities that are close to your heart?
Yeah, so I am actually an avid supporter. I mean, there's some great national and international charities. Personally, I like to try and invest as much as we can in smaller local organisations that are really going to make a difference. So I actually really like food banks. And
food banks?
Food banks.
Okay.
Yeah, the thought of something happening and being out of work and not being able to put food on my kids' tables and have a hungry 6 and 4 year old at home absolutely terrifies the life out of me. And I think a little bit of money actually with food banks goes an awful long way. There's a food bank in just about every town over the country. People can really make a difference through that.
Do you know what? For me, just turned 60 now. For me, I find it really quite upsetting that towns in the UK, particularly in the south, affluent places, county town where I had my office for 27 and a bit years, has got 4 food banks. I mean, if I go back 10, 15 years ago, I mean, if I'd said that was going to happen, people would have laughed.
I mean, and I think when you spend a bit of time around those organisations and you realise some of the demographic that those people using food banks come from, we've got a lot of our key workers there. We've got nurses, we've got bin men, we've got bus drivers, we've got like real salt of the earth people that make the world go round that can't put food on their table. I think the reason for that, I think something's gone wrong when, like I say, salt of the earth people that make the world go round can't put food on their table. And then secondly, what can business owners and local people do to make a real difference in their communities that are directly around them?
And it's interesting you say that, because we've had a number of people now on the podcast that have all got their preferences, but food banks hasn't been one. We've talked about food banks and we've talked about how shocking it is, but we haven't had a guest on that saying, it's a real passion for me. Yeah, but it's that fear again. You go back to that fear, don't you? You're worried about putting food on the table.
Yeah.
You're driving that car and you're worried about taking that corner too far. You want that it drives you on. It's a bit like the boxing, the fear factor of a failure, getting it wrong.
Yeah, I suppose, drives you, doesn't it? Yeah,
well, it's obviously driving you.
Yeah.
Before we sat down, I said to you that time would go really quickly. It has. I always love chatting to you. Always loved your company.
Appreciate it.
We have a theme on this show that we have lovely people on. You've carried it on. You're a top-notch guy. I don't think you're in any shadow, or you're not wearing no old man's shoes. Your shoes are better than these anyway, but you carry yourself amazingly well. I genuinely don't know anyone that doesn't like you. That's not the case with me, by the way. It's quite a lot of people. But you are a lovely, lovely man.
Appreciate
it's been
it.
an absolute pleasure to have you on Blighty Talks Bricks.
Great.
I wish you all the best with British Offsite.
Thank you very much.
I hope you get your first victory in a few weeks' time, because that'll be something else you've done, you see, because I haven't actually had. Mine was 3 draws. You could actually, I hope you get your first victory in your bout in a few weeks' time.
Yeah.
Give my love to the missus.
Thank you very much, Steve. Yeah,
Thank you very much for your time.
I'll try and get out of this chair with my massive swollen head after all that,
Viewers, listeners, we've come to another end. Another podcast for me has flown by. Another lovely man, got an amazing future in front of him. Does so many good things for people. Really hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. Look forward to seeing you on the next edition. Stay safe, take care, lots of love.